Overlord. Volume 14, Chapter 3, The Last King, Part 1. A large number of documents were gathered in this office along with several officials of internal affairs. Their expressions were hard to look at, the reason being their increased workload had taken its toll. Another reason for this would be the stress they felt from their knowledge of the kingdom's perilous status. Zanak shook his right hand, which had been signing so many documents that it started to ache, and moved his shoulders around in circles. He could hear his body creak as he did so. It seemed that his body, just like the others, desperately yearned for some rest. Though he wanted to take a break right now, the amount of work that was being transferred to this office was unfortunately ever increasing. Given that was the case, he should either fetch more hands to deal with this or distribute his work to the others. Unfortunately, there wasn't anyone there that Zanak could delegate his work to. If anyone was to take over Zanak's workload, it would have to be another member of the royal family. Zanak had his own reasons for not requesting help from his father or Renner. The truth was, he had access to aid but just couldn't call upon it. Zanak lifted up his pen again, scanned through the document that was placed in front of him, and signed and stamped it. After repeating the same routine for the 8th time, a knock on the door was heard. Sighs could be heard from multiple officials. Perhaps this was another delivery of even more documents. One of the officials, whose heavy breathing sounded unnaturally like a sow screeching, stood up and walked towards the door at a snail's pace. His movements were so sluggish that it was as though he believed that the slower he moved, the less he would have to work. A knight stood outside the door. "I'm terribly sorry for bothering you in these busy times, but Renner-sama wishes to speak with your highness." It wasn't what he had expected, but it was still an equally troublesome matter. "I am busy, so no. Tell her to talk to me during dinner if she has something to say." Ever since his brother went missing, Zanak and his family had tried to dine together as much as possible. These past few days were the exception. Renner had probably been dining alone for a while. She couldn't possibly be feeling lonely though. In these times when there was a shortage of maids, she would have dined with Climb and Brain instead. She was probably happier now than ever, perhaps happier than either Zanak or their father. "Yes, your highness." The knight shut the doors and left, but Zanak knew that Renner would not accept that excuse at all. Zanak stopped writing and ordered the official who was about to walk back to his post to stay in place. After about a minute had passed, the door was knocked on again and the same knight was behind it with the exact same message as before. "I'm very sorry, your highness." "The princess," she said, "if you don't want her to spread some rumors which may or may not be true, go meet with her at once." "Is she seriously resorting to threat?" Zanak gave a wry smile. Though he did not believe that his sister would actually do as she claimed, if she was willing to threaten him, he should probably listen to what she had to say. If rumors were actually spread around, no doubt his workload would increase even further. He just had to act as though he was being forced against his will. "Got it, let her in, but no one other than Renner. Those two, just let them wait in the adjacent room." "Yes, your highness." From the knight's immediate response, Zanak could tell that his predictions were correct. Those two had tagged along. Brain was the kingdom's best warrior, unparalleled in his strength. Climb was also much stronger than a regular warrior. To have those two stay inside the palace all day and be Redner's bodyguards felt like a waste of talent. Those two were not under the palace's direct employ but were instead paid through Redner's privy purse and thus were her direct subordinates. Zanak had no say about their assignment. After the knight had closed the doors, Zanak turned to the officials still toiling away in the room and said, "You all, my sister is due to arrive soon. What will I ever do with her? Rejoice, for a break is upon you all. 3 hours starting from now. Rest up and return rejuvenated." The officials gave their tired smiles and shambled out with heavy steps as if they were zombies. Princess Renner entered soon after. Unlike the officials who had just left, she had on her a radiant smile. "Oni-sama, forgive me for speaking out of turn, but those officials of internal affairs could be much more efficient if you let them rest well. People tend to make more mistakes when they are tired. Speaking of which, is Oni-sama alright? Zanak rubbed his stubble-covered chin. He had worked an equal amount of time as those officials, so he naturally appeared as tired as they were. He did want to take a rest, but as a superior, way too many things depended on him. I honestly think we should hire someone who could forge my signature. There was a person who could forge father's signature. Should I fetch him? Renner stared silently at Zanak. He knew what her question meant, but it was better to check to be sure. What do you mean? Is our father still well? Zanak had a wry smile. Oi, you think I would plot to kill our father? In this current situation? Father was not feeling too well, he's resting in his room. I doubt he could rest well if he was reminded of his duties as king. Which is why you, as the princess, should not meet him for now. Sorry. Redner's smile matched his. Upon seeing that, he knew she understood it all. Oni-sama, between us, there is no need to lie. Oni-sama, without Marquis Reven's soldiers, has enough manpower to place our father under surveillance. The ministers of the Interior and Military Affairs must have already joined Oni-sama's side. What does father plan to do? He still wants to talk it out with the Sorcerer's kingdom. Because of that, Zanak had to step in as the king's regent and take care of everything else the best he could. Since he had locked his father up, he had to take all of these matters into his own hands. If he still requested help from his father given these circumstances, he would truly be the most pathetic man ever. Still, I understand father's line of thought. After all, he had witnessed 200,000 men being instantly wiped out on the battlefield. Plus he had lost Gazefstranov and his own son. Zanak did not give voice to those thoughts but just grumbled in his heart. It is not that I cannot relate to his desire to settle this through diplomacy, to reduce the number of casualties to the lowest possible, but things have already progressed to a stage where a resolution through diplomacy is no longer possible. Zanak took out a huge sheet of paper and spread it on the table. It wasn't regular scrap paper, but a lavish piece of thin and white paper. On it was the full map of the kingdom made through copy. Look. These are the cities in the kingdom that had already fallen to the Sorcerer King's conquest. Numerous X marks dotted the northern and eastern sides of the kingdom. More than half of the cities were marked. Someone well versed in cartography would know from the size of those cities alone, they were home to a large number of people. Those who were intelligent enough should have already realized that if this map had included villages, the number of X's would be multitudes higher. Zanak traced a path on the map with his fingers. Though the Sorcerer's kingdom appeared to have not been making any moves since the war had begun, they had actually been invading the north. Renner looked at the country Zanak's finger stopped at. To put pressure on our neighbors like the council state, to prevent any reinforcement from being sent here, right? That's correct. We had thought that they had not been moving at all and that the declaration of war was just an empty threat. While our naive father was attempting to negotiate with them, things have already developed to this stage. Cities were destroyed and our people were massacred en masse. Zanak gnashed his teeth and made an audible sound. Such barbarity. Absolutely unforgivable. Those who could tolerate this kind of treatment were not fit to be called royalty. So the Sorcerer's kingdom has no intention of communicating with us. Surely they're planning something unprecedented? Right. You're right, what will happen next? Perhaps a more open act of aggression. Zanak nodded his head. That was why he had been busy formulating a call to arms to send to every noble within the country. Tell me, O sister of mine, please use that brilliant mind of yours. Why did we not notice the Sorcerer's kingdom's invasion? Why did we not receive any intel of the invasion before the northern city of Inaru had repelled the enemy's attack? When the Sorcerer's kingdom besieged a city, it was said that not a single soul was spared from the resulting massacre. However, To have made sure that no leaks had occurred was a feat that was pretty much impossible. After all, merchants and travelers still strutted around even during war times. What had they done to seal everybody's mouths? Was it some sort of spell by the Sorcerer King? Oni-sama could smell a whiff of it too, right? The Sorcerer's Kingdom had placed all of our sources of intel on lockdown. Ah, so you think so too? So if that was the case, these X marks might not be true either. If this wasn't something the Sorcerer's Kingdom had done, things would be much easier to explain. We may have a traitor amongst us. The primary possibility was that some official of internal affairs had betrayed them and were reporting false intel. The other possibility was that some of the kingdom's nobles had swung over to the Sorcerer's Kingdom's side and were submitting false reports. Zanak's finger continued to trace lines upon the map. He pondered, which noble could be corrupted to manipulate such a massive amount of intel. Zanak's finger stopped on a city and he moved it aside to not block it. "Oh sister of mine, surely you have figured it out already, which noble had betrayed us. Can't it be that other possibility?" She could see through him completely. Though in the past he had found his sister's intelligence to be annoying, she felt more reliable now than anything else. I could count on one hand the number of people who would have this much control over the intel that flows into the capital. The Minister of Military Affairs, for example, but not even he could control the flow of merchants and travelers in and out of the capital. It is impossible for anyone within the capital to have the ability to lock down our intel like that. If you understood this much, surely Oni-sama already has the answer in mind. It's Marquis Revan. How? Impossible. Zanak rejected that notion immediately, even though his finger had been resting on Ilibera. Do you really believe that to be impossible? Marquis Revan is one to dote over his son. What if someone was to kidnap his son and hold him hostage? Is that how they coerced Marquis Revan? Absolutely despicable. Though, I'm of the opinion that he may have betrayed us simply because he thought that the crown is doomed for. Although he was unwilling to believe in Marquis Revan's betrayal, there was no other nobleman who was as powerful as him. He would only need to call in a few favors with other nobles close to him before he could completely cut off the flow of intel to and from the city of his choice. The survivors would have also chosen to seek shelter and protection from the larger cities. Ilibera would have been an excellent choice in that regard. Was it because of those factors that the Sorcerer's Kingdom had set their sights on him? What kind of person do you believe the Sorcerer King to be? Abnormally flexible in his ways of thought, someone who possesses an entire nation's worth of intellect and guile. What is most terrifying about him is the fact that he does not simply rely on his overwhelming power, but meticulously plans his every move out. One could say that he is a monster to whom the concept of arrogance is completely foreign. HOH. Zanak looked at Renner. Something felt off about her. Her expression was the same as usual, but her voice carried an unusual emotion, that of awe and reverence. The web of plots unfolding in front of our eyes were perhaps weaved into the kingdom many years ago. We are but stuck moths. I would prefer to say butterflies. In any case, we are at their mercy. It does not matter if Oni-sama prefers to use butterflies in that metaphor or not. Even if we slip through these webs unharmed, there would just be another layer underneath. It is frankly terrifying. I did not believe that someone like him could exist in this world. What if our actions were all well within his calculations? So you are saying that he is better than you? Renner laughed and did not respond. Let's go back to our previous topic. Oni-sama is probably thinking about searching through Marquis Revan's residence, right? I do not think that you could find anything substantial there. That is true, but surely we cannot just remain idle, right? Given how likely it was that Marquis Revan had betrayed them, they had to do something about it. He was still hopeful that they could find even the slightest trace of a clue to all of this. Before we do that, I have a question for Oni-sama. If the current situation progresses on, the Sorcerer's Kingdom would surely initiate the final battle near the capital. Would Oni-sama order the soldiers to defend the city or send them out to receive the attack? How will we be raising our forces? I have already received satisfactory responses from our neighboring nobles. Those who were more distant had not replied yet. It wasn't because they had not received his message yet, but because they wished to watch from the sidelines. They probably wished to see the royalty wiped out so that they could bow to the Sorcerer King as his new subjects. Or perhaps it was because they did not want to get on the Sorcerer's kingdom's bad side by defending the kingdom. Either train of thought was naive to say the least. Their belief that they could distance themselves away from this was proof enough on its own of their utter stupidity. No, he shouldn't be mocking their idiocy. If they knew of how ruthless the Sorcerer's kingdom had been, they would not have done so. They were simply all victims to the information lock that was placed on them all. Once the capital fell, there was no doubt in his mind that the Sorcerer's kingdom would extend its brutality to the other cities. The nobles who wished to abstain from this battle would end up in defeat anyways. Do you believe that we could win? Zanak gave a wry smile and responded calmly to this convoluted question. It is not a matter of whether we win or lose, we simply have no option but to face them in battle. The Sorcerer's kingdom will scorch every inch of this country and slaughter all of our citizens. This is our last stake at survival. Oni-sama is already king, at what? What do you mean? Are you saying that I am being too full of myself? If we were to be defeated in this battle, wouldn't the kingdom be destroyed? If that is the case, then the citizens of the kingdom would not be safe no matter where they escape to. While I do not believe Oni-sama's choice to stake it all on this battle to be incorrect, Marquis Revan may have betrayed us for this reason too, to save the citizens. I see, so that his city could become a sanctuary for the refugees, But I doubt the Sorcerer King would allow that to happen. Perhaps he had also ordered Marquis Revan to kill the people seeking refuge in his city to test his loyalty. Why would Marquis Revan betray them? No, has he betrayed them at all? Perhaps this too was another ploy of the Sorcerer King, to sow the seeds of doubt amongst them to bait him and Renner in. Zanak recalled the Marquis Revan who only wanted a better future for the kingdom. Maybe he should write him a letter and have an honest conversation with him, but that could be a dangerous move. A traitor who continues to receive their former letters. That would certainly cause the Sorcerer King to cast doubts on him. That could be a ploy that he could use against them, but it was better saved for a situation in which Marquis Revan would be marching along with the Sorcerer King's army. This wasn't the best time to do something like this. If Marquis Revan really was being coerced by threats against his family's well-being, he could not fault him. Zanak recalled the Marquis Revan who excessively doted over his son. He reminisced so hard his eyes almost squinted into a line until he was knocked back to reality by the sight of his sister. Refugees? Speaking of which, father wanted you to, well, he wanted us to seek refuge in the city-state alliance as the kingdom's representatives. That was way before I placed father under surveillance. If you still want to do so, you better get away from the capital soon. Soon enough he will have to draft everybody he could and face a decisive battle against the Sorcerer's kingdom. If he was being honest, they had no chance at all. Defeat meant that the capital and the other cities would be razed to ashes. That meant that nowhere within the kingdom was safe. Perhaps they should follow their father's suggestion and abandon the country. In normal circumstances, there were two ways a victor would have dealt with the kingdom's former royalty. One was to mix their lineage through political marriages, the other was to wipe out everyone with royal blood to leave no loose ends behind. The Sorcerer's kingdom would definitely choose the latter. That is an excellent idea, would Oni-sama come to? At this point, how could I? If our elder brother was still here I would have chosen to run too. Don't mind me, what are you going to do? The Sorcerer King is undead so he probably wouldn't take that kind of interest in women, so they would undoubtedly be killed too. If the Sorcerer's kingdom attacked us, I could be violated by one of our own who's desperate enough to do so. Zanak showed his disgust on his face upon hearing how calmly his sister had said such words. But, he had to admit that she was also being realistic. Redna's beauty was renowned, it wouldn't be out of the question for those kinds of people to exist. Then remember to not leave Climb and Unglaus's side for now. Okay, I won't let Climb leave my side. There's no one but the two of us here and I won't speak of it given the current situation, but you have to answer me with those two. Why would Brain Unglaus choose to serve under this woman? Though he had heard rumors that Brain was interested in Climb, he did not appear to be gay in the slightest. However, after some investigations, it did appear that he had not had a woman at all. It couldn't possibly be because he's only interested in children, right? He did not give voice to those thoughts given how scary his sister is. If those two were to find out about it, it would be troublesome. Anyways, I do not intend to flee. As a princess, I will face death with grace and dignity. That was unexpected. He had thought about this in the past, about how she would be fine with any kind of life as long as she was with Climb. Perhaps she was only putting up a front and had already prepared to escape. She would be the type to do that. But even a corpse could still be exploited by the Sorcerer King. Perhaps, will Oni-sama be leading the army against the Sorcerer King? Yeah. Even though my presence would not make a difference at all, the army needs a royal to lead them. I have to take a stand. Zanak looked towards the ceiling. You have said something to the effect that I am the king to be in the past, that is why this responsibility falls on me. Father will hopefully take care of my funeral arrangements. You can choose to run away at any time. Though he found his sister to be annoying most of the time, they still shared the same blood. To do what a brother should was the least he could do. Perhaps he could receive God's pity after his death. I understand. I'll do so when the time comes. As Zanak retracted his gaze on her, he saw that Renner had replied with her usual smile.